Look at her, pretending she belongs here.
They say the evidence was tampered with.
She can't be trusted.
Is she really qualified for this? Look at how she carries herself.
Is she serious? Someone muttered. Who even wears that here? Lila froze, pretending not to hear, but her chest tightened. Eyes scanned the room, a cluster of women with their designer gowns and sleek jackets, smirks dancing across their faces. The sound of laughter, low and knowing, reached her ears. She forced her jaw to relax, adjusted the cuff of her stylish but simple blazer. The judge's badge in her hand felt heavier than it had any right to be. One of the women stepped forward, a perfectly manicured finger pointing. You can't be on the panel like that, she sneered. Something in Lila snapped. Her voice, calm but edged with steel, cut through the din. Watch me. Gasps circled the room. The murmurs became a wave of scrutiny. Cameras flashed. Everyone's eyes were locked on her outfit, her stance, her very presence. The tension was a living thing, pressing on her from all sides. Then the event coordinator appeared, whispering something into the ear of the room's head organizer. Lila caught just one word, judge. The air shifted. A pause. Then the laughter faltered. A few people stiffened. And somewhere deep in the crowd, the sharpest smirk she had seen all night turned into a frown. Because no one knew, yet, that Lila wasn't just attending. She was the final authority. And the next word, when it came, would decide everything. Cliffhanger, a sudden voice from the crowd shouted. Wait, you're supposed to. Lila stepped into the hall, her heels tapping against polished marble. The room buzzed with conversation, the air thick with perfume and anticipation. She could feel eyes on her before she even reached the main floor. Look at that outfit, a voice whispered just behind her. Another chuckle followed. She doesn't belong here. She straightened her back, adjusted the cuff of her blazer. Her shoulders stiffened under invisible weight. Ignore them. Just walk. She moved forward. The whispers didn't fade, they grew sharper, weaving around her like a net. Every step magnified the judgment. People's eyes flicked to her clothes, her posture, even her calm expression. A woman in a navy silk gown tilted her head, lips pressed tight. Really? That? Lila's fingers tightened around the envelope in her hand. Inside, the notes for the judging panel. Everything rides on this. She forced her jaw to relax. Are you lost, dear? Another voice chimed, smooth and patronizing. I'm not lost. I'm exactly where I need to be. Her internal voice was a low hum of resistance. Someone laughed quietly. She thinks she's one of us. The air shifted. Murmurs became a low wave, curling around her. Cameras flashed briefly. Flashes reflected in polished shoes and sparkling gowns. Lila caught sight of the event coordinator, whispering to the head organizer. Her stomach tightened. You can't be serious, the first woman said again, stepping closer. Her finger pointed. Accusatory. Sharp. Lila met the gaze calmly, feeling a storm building inside her chest. Watch me, she said softly, but with steel threaded through each syllable. The crowd shifted. Some gasped. Some froze mid-step. A man in the corner's eyebrows shot up, the crease of confusion deepening across his forehead. Her mind raced. Every whisper felt like a jab, but she held herself steady. She reminded herself, authority isn't in their approval. It's in what you carry, not what they see. A chair scraped across the floor behind her. A murmur rose. Wait, who is she? Then she heard it, a sharp, incredulous voice cutting through the murmurs. You're supposed to. The words hit the room like a sudden wind. Lila's calm exterior didn't falter, but inside, her heartbeat spiked. Eyes darted, murmurs swelled. The tension was tangible, almost heavy enough to touch. Someone clutched a champagne flute, tilting it slightly as their lips formed an almost imperceptible smirk. Others leaned in, eager, tense. They hadn't expected this. They had assumed weakness, they had assumed compliance. But she was no attendee. She held the authority now, invisible but absolute, threaded through her notes, her badge, her knowledge. Every slight, every whisper, every side-eye glanced her way was about to collide with the truth. The first woman's lips parted, ready to speak again, eyes narrowing with renewed contempt. Who do you think you are? She hissed. And in that heartbeat, frozen between laughter and shock, the room waited. For Lila, for her first move. For the revelation that would rip through the smug calm of the crowd. Cliffhanger, the voice in the back repeated, louder this time. Wait, you're the judge. Lila's pulse quickened. She smiled, just slightly. The stage was set. And the real story was about to begin. The room seemed to shrink around Lila. Every whisper, every sideways glance, felt like it pressed against her skin. She moved toward the judging table, heels tapping in rhythm with her heartbeat. Conversations slowed, then restarted once she passed, like ripples on water. But those ripples carried tension, suspicion, and judgment. Who invited her? Someone murmured, low enough to be almost polite, but sharp in intent. Lila caught it, though. She didn't respond. She couldn't, not yet. Every eye in the room was awake, heavy, questioning, calculating. A man in a grey suit leaned toward his companion. I don't even think she's qualified. His voice was casual, but every word dripped with condescension. They have no idea, Lila thought. They have no clue. She kept moving, placing her notes on the table with deliberate precision. The panel chairs scraped as the other judges shifted, some glancing at her with thinly veiled doubt. She noticed the subtle hierarchy, who was seated closest to her, who whispered first, who laughed last. Each movement a micro-tactic of exclusion. "Can we start already?" a female judge said, flicking her hair and smirking. Lila barely registered the words. She was studying the room, memorizing every pattern of scrutiny. A waiter passed, his tray of champagne nearly brushing her arm. He hesitated, then moved it slightly away. Even the staff notices me differently, she realized. A small smile tugged at her lips, ironic, private. "I've been here before. Not like this, but similar." "Is she?" whispered one of the attendees, trailing off, eyes darting between Lila and her notes. "Yes," said another, smirking. "Apparently she's important." The word hung in the air. Important. But to them, it meant something else, unfit, out of place, presumptuous. Then a sudden movement. A young intern accidentally dropped a folder near Lila. Papers skittered across the marble. Someone behind her snorted. "Clumsy, aren't you?" Her jaw tightened. "Accidents happen," she said softly, bending to gather the papers. The room held its collective breath, waiting for a stumble. A misstep. Anything to prove them right. But she finished silently, placing the folders neatly on the table. She sat down. The chair creaked slightly under her weight, a small sound amplified by the silence. The other judges looked at her again, some raising an eyebrow, some curling a lip. "Do we even know she's read the guidelines?" muttered a voice across the table. Lila's fingers tightened on her pen. "They want me to fail before I even speak." The first participant of the evening approached, a young designer in a metallic gold dress, confidence almost radiating from her. Lila stood to greet her, noting the subtle hesitation in the designer's step. The crowd had expectations, but Lila's presence challenged them all. "Good evening," Lila said, her tone calm but deliberate. "I'm looking forward to seeing your collection." A small murmur ran through the attendees. Some whispered behind hands, others shot quick glances. Lila caught fragments. Does she even know fashion? Who let her here? The designer smiled nervously, as if sensing the scrutiny. "Thank you, she said, trying to keep her own nerves from showing. "Let's begin," Lila said, flipping to her first page of notes. The session started. Lila asked questions, made observations. She spoke with authority, her voice steady, clear. Yet the murmurs didn't stop, they only shifted in tone, veiled now, coded. A side comment here, a quick exchange of looks there. Institutional bias was subtle but pervasive. Even her fellow judges occasionally interrupted, rephrasing her observations in a tone meant to belittle, to reassert their own power. "Interesting choice of material," one whispered to another, deliberately loud enough for her to hear. "I wouldn't expect her to know about fabric quality." Lila caught the edge of sarcasm but didn't respond. Instead, she asked a thoughtful question, forcing the participant to explain technique, color selection, and inspiration. Eyes in the room widened. A few people leaned forward, curiosity mingling with disbelief. Then a new tension emerged. One of the event coordinators stepped close, whispering something barely audible. "Someone's asking if you even have your credentials with you." Lila's chest tightened. She glanced at him, calm but internally simmering. "Really? I have them right here," she said, producing her badge and certification. The coordinator's eyes flicked to the papers, then away. Silence fell, brief but loaded. The room's energy shifted. People were watching, waiting for a misstep. Every step she took, every note she wrote, every question she asked was now amplified under scrutiny. The microaggressions continued, slight nods, hidden smirks, quiet comparisons, but she ignored them, keeping her focus on the designs. "You're very direct," someone said from across the room. A compliment, or a barb disguised as praise? Lila's mind paused the tone instantly. Everything here is calculated. The second participant approached, a confident man in his late 20s. He paused when he saw her, the recognition in his eyes fleeting but real. "I wasn't expecting you," he said carefully. Lila smiled faintly, neutral, letting the weight of her presence speak for her. "I'm here to judge the work, not to be expected." The tension escalated further when whispers started to circle about her appearance again. "Look at the color she's wearing," a woman muttered. "It's unusual for this kind of event." The subtle racism wrapped around her like a cloak, pressing, persistent. She felt the room's eyes piercing her, every thought, every doubt, every judgment silently broadcast. Her heartbeat rose, but her expression stayed calm, unyielding. Then a man at the back of the hall, leaning against the wall, leaned forward with a smirk. "You sure you belong here? Don't let anyone see you mess up." Lila's pulse spiked. A flicker of anger rose inside her, but she swallowed it. Every word, every pause, was a trap they were trying to set. She had to remain poised. She had to turn this psychological pressure into authority. The micro-twists kept coming. A participant whispered a comment meant to unsettle her, a judge subtly challenged her notes, a photographer angled a camera in a way that made her feel under scrutiny. Every detail counts. Every movement is being measured. By the end of the second hour, fatigue was creeping in, but so was clarity. The crowd was learning that she was unfazed, meticulous, and quietly commanding respect. The subtle power dynamics were shifting, imperceptibly at first, but perceptibly to those paying attention. Then the cliffhanger struck. From across the hall, a voice, loud, sharp, cutting through the whispers, said, "Wait a minute, you're the head judge." The room froze. Eyes widened. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Cameras swiveled. The undercurrent of microaggressions faltered, replaced by a pulse of shock and disbelief. Lila's calm gaze swept the room, masking the surge of adrenaline inside her. She had expected this moment. The real challenge was about to begin, and the crowd would not be ready for what came next. Cliffhanger. The murmurs rose again, louder this time, voices overlapping in confusion, disbelief, and thinly veiled resentment. Lila inhaled slowly, bracing herself for the storm that was coming. The moment the words left the man's mouth, "You're the head judge," the room shifted. Conversations paused mid-laughter. Eyes darted, some narrowing, some widening in disbelief. Lila stayed seated, the badge in her hand weighty but invisible to most. Her calm exterior was a shield. Inside, adrenaline sparked like a live wire. A woman in a crisp white blazer, sharp heels clicking, stepped forward. Her gaze was direct, pointed. "So, you're going to judge us," she said, tone dripping with thinly veiled skepticism. "I am," Lila replied smoothly, voice measured. "Control the voice, control the room." The woman's smirk didn't falter. "And you think you're qualified?" Her hand gestured vaguely, dismissively, toward the other judge's notes. "I mean, with all due respect." Lila tilted her head, eyes calm, scanning the room for reactions. Some attendees shifted uneasily, catching the tension. Some leaned closer, whispering quietly, "What is she going to do?" "I am," Lila repeated, firmer this time. "And my qualifications are listed here." She tapped her folder. "I've reviewed every submission in advance. I am prepared." A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. One of the male judges leaned back, arms crossed, frowning. "She's confident," he muttered, his voice laced with doubt, more to himself than anyone else. "Confident," the woman scoffed. "I'd call it audacious." She leaned slightly forward, her eyes sharp. "Do you understand the stakes here? This isn't just about style. This is prestige, reputation, influence. One wrong call." Lila's pulse ticked faster. She felt the room's gaze drilling into her, every whisper a silent accusation. "One wrong call, yes. And yet, I won't stumble." A participant stepped forward nervously, holding a metallic clutch. I don't know if you—" "Excuse me," Lila interrupted gently but firmly. "Please step aside. I'll ask questions when it's time." The participant hesitated, swallowing quickly. The smirk from the woman in white didn't fade. If anything, it deepened. Power had shifted slightly, and she wasn't pleased. "You know," the woman said, leaning in conspiratorially, "judges are usually, well, experienced in the room. I've seen plenty of head judges make mistakes on simple things. Lila's fingers tightened around her pen. Every word was a calculated jab, an attempt to undermine her authority. She remained still, eyes scanning, mind calculating. Every challenge is a test. Every glance a move on the board. From behind the crowd, someone whispered to another, "She's too calm." Almost scary. Yes. Let them be uneasy. The first participant, now hesitant, tried to regain composure. "Your opinion, what if it conflicts with the panel?" "I consider every perspective," Lila said, steady. "And I make decisions based on merit, not assumptions." The woman in white leaned back, crossing her arms, voice low but cutting. "Merit, that's subjective, isn't it?" Lila's gaze flicked to the other judges. Some looked uncomfortable, others neutral. She let a slow smile form, neutral yet pointed. "Perhaps. But in my view, merit is measured by craft, creativity, and vision, not by expectation or stereotype." A murmur ran through the room, soft but undeniable. The tension thickened, a current running through the crowd. Some whispered admiration, some resentment. The first microtwist had landed. Lila's words had subtly reshaped the room, forcing them to confront their own biases without knowing it. "Interesting," the woman said, voice tight, forcing a smile. "You have a way of phrasing things." Lila's mind catalogued it all, the clipped words, the eyes that flicked away, the posture shifts, the whispered side comments. Institutional bias was subtle but constant here. Every staff member, every participant, every judge had a script, and she was rewriting it with her presence. Then came the second microtwist. A participant, nervous but bold, said aloud, "Some of us were told the head judge would be someone else. Are you sure about this?" The comment landed like a pebble into a still pond. The room stilled again, and all eyes turned toward Lila. "I am sure," she said simply. "And I am ready. Let's focus on the work, not the expectations of others." A ripple of discomfort swept through the woman in white. Her jaw tightened, lips pressed thin. Her smirk faltered, replaced by something sharper, anger, disbelief, and a thin layer of fear that she couldn't hide. From the back, a male judge muttered to a colleague, "She's handling it better than I expected." The whispers started again, this time questioning more than just her credentials. "Did you see how she corrected him?" one attendee said quietly. "She's commanding." "Commanding," another repeated. "She's bold. Too bold. And it's unsettling." Lila caught fragments of every comment, every whisper. Each was a strike at her authority, a push to see her falter. "Let them try," she thought. "I won't give them that satisfaction." Then the next threat arrived. The woman in white leaned forward again, voice sharp. "You realize, of course, that one mistake, one error in judgment could ruin careers, including yours." Silence fell. The words were deliberate, heavy, laced with authority abuse. Every attendee felt the tension spike. Cameras focused, flashes flickered. Lila's heartbeat surged. But she didn't flinch. She kept her voice calm, slow, unshakable. "I understand the responsibility, and I will not let it deter me from fairness." A flicker of shock crossed the woman's face. A subtle shift in the crowd occurred, eyes widening, murmurs rising, some attendees leaning in as if to witness a spectacle. Lila had claimed control, but the room was far from compliant. Then came the microtwist no one expected. The coordinator whispered something to the woman in white. She stiffened. Her lips parted in disbelief. Eyes darted toward Lila, confusion and irritation mixing in a way that revealed the first crack in the facade. The whispers rose, louder, more chaotic. "Wait, she's really the head judge." Lila's calm gaze swept the room, absorbing every flicker of expression, every subtle shift in posture. She had anticipated resistance, tension, even thinly veiled threats. But now, the challenge was visible, tangible, boiling over. Her pulse was steady, her mind clear. "Let them test me. Let them challenge authority. I will expose the bias without a single misstep." The woman in white stepped back, muttering under her breath, "We'll see how long she lasts." Lila inhaled slowly. Every muscle remained relaxed, but her eyes were sharp, scanning, alert. The room held its collective breath, waiting for her response, waiting for the next move, and unknowingly, waiting to be shown a lesson in authority and merit. Cliffhanger, a participant leaned forward, whispering loudly enough for nearby cameras to catch. "Do you think she'll actually be able to handle this? Or are we about to watch her fail?" The room froze, anticipation crackling like electricity. Lila's slight, almost imperceptible smile hinted she had already turned the tide, and the real challenge was just beginning. The murmurs never stopped. Every step Lila took toward the judging table was measured, watched. Even the chandeliers seemed to lean in, catching the reflections of her heels on polished marble, amplifying the hush of conversation. She could feel the weight of the room pressing in from every angle. A coordinator brushed past her, murmuring something barely audible to another staff member. Lila caught the word unexpected. A smirk flickered across his face before he turned away. Unexpected, she thought. They don't know what they are dealing with. Across the hall, whispers traveled like a current. Is she really qualified? One attendee asked, almost nervously. She must be bluffing, another replied, eyes narrowed. No one that young has her experience. No one that, different. The coded language stung. Different, right. Not like them. Lila felt the familiar heat of microaggressions brushing against her skin. Every glance, every side comment, reinforced it. Yet she moved forward, notes in hand, posture steady. A young intern, tasked with arranging materials, fumbled slightly near her. Here, let me. Thank you, Lila said calmly, gently straightening the papers. The intern's eyes flickered with relief. A few participants glanced her way, a mix of curiosity and doubt. Let them watch. Let them see competence over expectation. She reached the table. The judges were murmuring among themselves, exchanging thin smiles, side comments barely concealed. One whispered, "Do we intervene?" Another shook their heads subtly. "No. Let's see what she does." Let them. They'll learn. The first participant of the second round approached, a young designer with a bright scarf and cautious steps. She stopped abruptly when she noticed Lila's steady gaze. I hope I'm ready," she said. "You are," Lila replied, soft but firm. "Let's focus on your work." Whispers again. "She's intimidating," a bystander said, barely audible. "Yes, and she's calm." "Too calm," another whispered back. "It's unsettling." The room's tension was subtle but palpable, a mixture of admiration, fear, and quiet resistance. Institutional bias revealed itself not in shouted insults but in clipped words, stifled laughter, and sideways glances. Lila noticed every microexpression, catalogued them internally. These are the true dynamics, the unspoken rules. I know them. A side door opened. A photographer leaned through, camera at the ready. "Can I get a shot of the head judge?" he asked. Lila's eyes met his. She tilted her head slightly, assessing the angle. "Only if it's fair," she said, her tone calm, almost playful. "Even they are under scrutiny now." Behind her, a murmuring participant muttered, "Do you see how everyone flinches when she moves?" "Yes," a bystander whispered. "It's like she owns the air in here." The air grew heavier as the third participant approached. A man in a muted green jacket, confident, trying to mask uncertainty. His eyes lingered on Lila, calculating, questioning. "You've seen the guidelines, yes?" he asked, a faint challenge in his tone. "I have," Lila replied, eyes level with his, calm, deliberate. "And I've considered every submission. Let's discuss your collection." His shoulders stiffened, a subtle resistance forming. "I've worked hard. Don't misjudge my work." "Misjudge?" she thought. "No, not today. Only based on merit," she said, flipping a page. "Not assumptions. Not preconceptions." The man's jaw clenched, but he nodded, uncertain whether he had been subtly scolded or simply corrected. Around them, whispers rose again. "She's fearless," someone said. "Too fearless," another replied. "It's not proper." The room's tension climbed. A staff member approached, leaning close to the woman in white. Words whispered, urgent, carrying implications Lila could only partially catch. She felt the ripple immediately. The crowd sensed it too, a subtle but tangible shift. Lila's mind catalogued it. They are testing her. Checking limits. Looking for cracks. They won't find any. She focused on the participant, asking detailed questions about color, cut, material, technique. Every word, every gesture was deliberate. She maintained calm, attentive eye contact. Slowly, the whispers began to change, not all, but some. Doubt mixed with curiosity. Respect, muted but growing, seeped through. The woman in white moved slightly closer, muttering under her breath. "She's thorough. She sees everything." "Yes, and she doesn't flinch," another judge added quietly. Then came the first microtwist of the chapter. The man in green, previously tense, tilted his head and said aloud, "I didn't expect this level of understanding. I underestimated you." The crowd gasped softly. Whispered comments escalated. Did she just? She caught him off guard. Another participant, previously skeptical, muttered to a friend, "She's really doing it. She's commanding respect." The room was a web of tension, admiration, and thinly veiled resentment. Lila felt the psychological pressure, but she also felt the subtle shift in power. They were beginning to acknowledge her authority, even if grudgingly. A photographer angled a camera toward the woman in white. Her smirk faltered, lips pressing tight. Her whispered comments faltered, replaced by uncertainty. Finally, Lila thought, the cracks appear. But then came the next threat, subtle yet sharp. The coordinator leaned close to the woman in white, whispering in her ear. The smirk vanished entirely, replaced by visible irritation. Eyes flicked toward Lila, narrowing. The tension spiked again. "You may have some influence now," the coordinator murmured under his breath, "but the main sponsor has doubts. Be careful." Lila caught the word doubts. She smiled faintly to herself, inside only. Let them doubt. The truth will be undeniable. Then a murmur rose from the back of the hall, louder than before. "Are you sure she can handle this? Really?" The crowd leaned in, curiosity and skepticism blending into a tangible force. Cameras flashed again. Every whisper now carried weight, every glance calculated. Lila's pulse remained steady. She inhaled slowly. Every microaggression, every biased whisper, every subtle attempt at intimidation was now a tool in her favor. She had turned the room into a stage. She controlled the narrative. This is the real challenge, she thought. Not the designers. Not the event. The challenge is them. Her gaze swept across the room, catching each subtle expression. The whispered comments, the quiet nods, the small gestures of submission and defiance. Every single one mapped, catalogued, understood. And now, she thought, it's time to push the tension even further. Cliffhanger. From the corner of the hall, the woman in white spoke louder this time, enough for half the attendees to hear. "You don't belong here. This is our world, not yours." The room froze. Lila's calm smile didn't falter. Her eyes, sharp and steady, swept the crowd. Every subtle murmur of doubt, every hidden whisper of bias, now had to collide with the undeniable authority she held. The storm was coming, and everyone could feel it. The crowd had grown restless. Conversations buzzed around Lila, punctuated by soft gasps and the occasional snicker. Every pair of eyes seemed to weigh her, calculate her, test her. She adjusted her notes on the judging table, flipping to the first designer's submission. The young woman in the metallic gold dress approached, confidence tight, like a spring coiled under pressure. "Good evening," she said quietly, eyes flicking toward Lila. "Good evening," Lila replied, keeping her tone calm and measured. "I've reviewed your submission. Let's discuss the choices you made with fabric, cut, and color. Tell me what inspired these designs." A hush fell. Some attendees leaned forward, curious. Others whispered to neighbors, questioning, "Will she be fair? Does she know what she's talking about?" "She's asking about the details," one murmured. "Really digging in. Not like a casual glance. Or maybe she's just overstepping," another whispered back, tone sharp, full of skepticism. The designer's hands trembled slightly. I focused on sustainability," she said. "The fabrics are organic, dyed naturally. And the colors are meant to reflect seasonal shifts." Lila nodded, pen poised. "And the cuts? Why these silhouettes?" "They represent structure and movement. Balance in chaos," the designer replied. A small murmur ran through the crowd. Some whispered admiration, others muttered disbelief. "She's thorough," someone said softly. "Yes, and she's intimidating," another replied. Lila's gaze swept the room, cataloguing every whisper, every smirk, every side eye. She knew the subtle racism, the expectation that she would falter. That she would be the token judge, too inexperienced, too different to wield authority. A man in a tailored suit leaned forward, voice low but sharp. "You're very particular, aren't you? Not everyone appreciates that level of scrutiny." Particular or competent? Lila thought. "I evaluate every submission with fairness," she said calmly. "Merit is my only guide." The whispering continued. "Fairness? That's subjective," someone muttered. "Yes, and sometimes perception is the bias we must fight," Lila said under her breath, almost to herself, but loud enough for the designer to hear. The girl straightened slightly, reassured. Then came a small, almost imperceptible challenge. A staff member leaned close to one of the male judges. "She's thorough. Too thorough. Some sponsors might be concerned." The man nodded subtly, frowning. "Yes, we'll see if she maintains composure." The woman in white stepped forward again, crossing her arms. "You know, not everyone can handle pressure. Especially in a room like this," she said, voice calm but threatening, the weight of social expectation behind each word. "I can," Lila replied softly. Her eyes didn't waver. Her hands didn't shake. Her pen remained steady. "And I will." A participant, hearing the exchange, whispered nervously to another, "She's holding them all in check." "I didn't expect that." "Yes," the other whispered back. "And I don't think they like it." The designer began explaining more about her work. Lila asked questions, subtle yet incisive, revealing the depth of the creative choices. The room was tense. Some participants whispered criticism behind their hands, questioning Lila's authority. But others, unwilling to admit it, began to lean forward, engaged by her expertise. Then came the first microtwist of the judging round. The woman in white leaned close to the coordinator, muttering sharply, "She's influencing them. The audience is changing." "Yes," the coordinator said, eyes flicking toward Lila. "But can she handle the final critique? That's when the real pressure comes." A murmur ran through the room. Cameras swiveled, capturing subtle reactions. Participants who had been quietly confident now hesitated under her gaze, unsure whether to challenge, to defend, or to retreat. The second microtwist arrived as the first designer finished her explanation. Lila's pen paused. She looked at the participant, eyes steady. "Your choice of metallic fabric is strong," she said. "It reflects the light beautifully, but it risks overwhelming the silhouette. Consider balance in layering, less can create more impact." A hush fell. Some attendees nodded. Others frowned, muttering quietly, She sees everything." The woman in white scowled, muttering to herself, voice sharp. "She's assessing beyond what's expected." Dangerous. The tension was palpable. The whispers were no longer just about clothing. They were about Lila, her authority, and the challenge she represented. Every critique is a test of their bias, she thought. Every reaction, a microtwist in the narrative. Then came the third microtwist. A participant, previously skeptical, asked loudly, "Are you sure your critique isn't influenced?" Lila looked directly at the girl. Calm, measured, commanding. "My critiques are never influenced by expectation, assumption, or bias. They are rooted in observation and merit alone." The room stiffened. Murmurs rose, layered with admiration, doubt, and disbelief. Cameras flashed. Whispers darted across the audience. "She's authoritative. She's unflinching." The woman in white smirk faltered. Her lips pressed tight. "We'll see how long she maintains that poise," she muttered under her breath. Lila's pulse remained steady. She knew the storm was just beginning. Microaggressions, coded language, subtle intimidation. She had faced them all before. But the real challenge was now fully visible: the crowd, the panel, and the event itself. The first judgment concluded. Lila's critique had been precise, calm, and thorough. Yet the subtle tension lingered, the whispers continued, and the undercurrent of bias remained, like a river just beneath the surface. Cliffhanger. As the next participant approached, a voice from the back shouted, loud and incredulous, "Wait, are you really going to judge this properly? Or is this going to be a disaster?" The room froze. Lila's gaze swept the crowd. Calm, steady, unyielding. Every microtwist, every bias, every whispered doubt, now had to confront her authority directly. The real challenge, the one that would define her control over the room, was about to begin. The room had shifted. Where whispers had ruled before, now a charged silence stretched between every participant, every judge, every observer. Lila sat poised at the judging table, her notes spread like armor, each line of critique carefully chosen. She could feel the weight of the crowd, the subtle calculations behind each glance, each whispered comment. From the corner, the woman in white leaned toward her companion, voice low but venomous. "Do you see her? She's commanding everyone. No one dares contradict her." "Yes," the companion whispered back, barely audible. "But some still don't believe it's real authority. Just wait." Lila's eyes swept the room. She saw it, subtle gestures, clenched jaws, crossed arms, eyes flicking toward her, skepticism, doubt, and fear. Perfect, she thought. They are underestimating how far this authority goes. The next participant approached, a young designer in a vibrant green ensemble, confidence radiating in a way that suggested she thought she had control. Her gaze lingered on Lila, wary yet curious. "Good evening," she said, voice steady but cautious. "Good evening," Lila replied, pen poised. "Let's discuss your work. Tell me about your design choices, your inspirations, and your techniques." The designer inhaled, careful to maintain composure. "I wanted to challenge traditional silhouettes, to make movement part of the design. The colors were chosen for contrast and harmony." "Interesting," Lila said, tilting her head slightly. "How do you feel your choices reflect both innovation and wearability?" A hush spread through the crowd. The question was simple, but the tone, neutral, unyielding, precise, sent a ripple of tension. Some attendees exchanged glances, whispering quietly, "She's evaluating carefully. Not overstepping, but clearly in control." Then came the first micro-twist. From the back of the room, a participant whispered loudly enough for the nearby cameras to catch. "She's not just judging, they are watching her too." "Yes," another replied. "Everyone is recalculating. Every critique, every word, it's all being measured." The woman in white scowled, muttering to herself. "This isn't how it's supposed to go. She's exposed everything." Lila continued her critique. Each observation was precise, insightful, and fair. Yet she could feel the thin layer of tension thickening, a subtle but unrelenting pressure. Institutional bias pulsed around her, coded in every sideways glance, every whispered commentary, every hesitant nod. "Your use of layering is effective," Lila said, meeting the designer's eyes. "But be careful, too much volume can obscure movement. Consider where the eye should travel first." The participant nodded, swallowing nerves. A murmur swept through the audience. Cameras flicked in her direction. Some participants whispered admiration, others whispered doubt. The microaggressions, subtle yet persistent, were now visible in their reactions. Then the second micro-twist. The woman in white cleared her throat, loud enough for a few to hear. "Are you sure your judgments aren't swayed by appearances? By expectations?" A pause. Lila met her gaze calmly. "My judgments are based on merit alone. Not expectation. Not bias. Not assumption." The silence that followed was loaded. Even the organizers seemed caught off guard. Murmurs rose in hushed tones, layered with disbelief. "She's firm. Fair. Unflinching." Suddenly, a staff member stepped forward, a subtle frown on his face. Some of the participants have concerns about transparency. They are questioning decisions." Lila's eyes didn't flicker. Calm, precise, measured. Transparency is maintained. Decisions are explained, justified, and documented. "Any other questions?" Murmurs went quiet, the audience holding its collective breath. Microtension had become visible tension, and the stakes had escalated. Then came the third micro-twist. One participant, attempting to undermine her authority, asked loudly, "But how do we know your critiques are impartial? You could favor someone unintentionally." Lila's eyes swept the room slowly. Every gaze fixed on her, waiting for her response. She inhaled, calm, deliberate. "Impartiality is the foundation of judgment. I assess every work based on craft, creativity, and vision. Not on assumption, not on expectation. Every decision is documented and justified." The room stiffened. Some whispered disbelief. Others exchanged subtle nods of approval. Cameras caught the exchange, flashes flickering. From the back, a bystander whispered, "She's unshakable." They don't know how to respond. "Yes," replied another quietly. "And it's uncomfortable for them." The woman in white stepped forward, more forcefully this time, voice dripping with threat. "You realize, of course, that one misstep could ruin careers. Including yours. Are you prepared for that responsibility?" Lila's pulse stayed steady. Every subtle threat, every whispered doubt, was now in plain view. "I am," she said, voice calm, eyes unwavering. "I am fully prepared for the responsibility my role entails. That is why I am here." A ripple ran through the audience. The crowd, once skeptical, now began to reconsider. Some participants straightened in their seats. Some judges exchanged glances. Even the event staff seemed to pause, acknowledging the subtle shift of power. Then the ultimate twist. From the back of the hall, someone in the audience, a participant's friend, murmured loudly, "Wait, she's not just a judge, she's the judge." Gasps echoed across the room. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Cameras pivoted. Attendees leaned forward, caught in the tension. The whispers turned into audible exclamations. She's in charge? All this power, in her hands. Lila's calm smile masked the surge of adrenaline. She had anticipated this revelation. She had expected resistance. But the psychological pressure, the bias, the subtle intimidation, all of it, was now exposed to everyone. The crowd shifted uneasily. The woman in white smirk faltered, lips pressing thin. Her eyes darted around the room, measuring reactions, calculating next moves. But Lila remained poised, unflinching, commanding the attention and respect she had earned. Every whisper, every glance, every doubt now had to confront authority. Cliffhanger, a loud voice, dripping with disbelief and thinly veiled hostility, rose from the audience. You're judging us? Really? You don't belong here. The room froze. Lila's gaze swept the hall, calm, sharp, and unyielding. The storm had arrived, and everyone could feel it. The exposure was complete. Backstage, the air was thick with tension and perfume, the sharp scent of nerves mixing with fabric and polish. The main hall's chaos was just a faint murmur here, but the pressure followed Lila like a shadow. Every step she took echoed against the walls lined with racks of garments, mirrors reflecting anxious faces. Unbelievable, muttered a designer, leaning against a rack. She handled that like she owns the room. She does, whispered another, barely audible. And it scares some of them. Lila's heels clicked softly as she approached the judging station set up behind the scenes. Her notes were organized, precise, but her pulse was still racing. The adrenaline of the public exposure lingered, a low hum beneath her calm exterior. The coordinator approached, voice low but urgent. Some participants are questioning decisions. They are backstage now. Angry, confused. Some are pushing limits. Lila nodded, calm but alert. I expected resistance. Let them test boundaries. I won't falter. From the corner, the woman in white stepped forward, voice sharp. You may have convinced the audience, but don't think for a second this backstage chaos doesn't matter. Some of us have influence. I know, Lila replied evenly. Influence is meaningless without merit. A murmur ran through the designers. Some swallowed nervously. Others glanced toward their peers, unsure whether to defend, confront, or retreat. The tension was visible now, a current running through every whispered word, every sideways glance, every subtle gesture. You really think you can handle this? The woman in white pressed, stepping closer. Her eyes narrowed. Pressure doesn't stop after the hall. People will try to undermine you, here, there, everywhere. You're outnumbered. Lila tilted her head slightly, calm, unshakable. I expect it, and I will handle it. A junior designer, clutching a rolled-up sketch, stepped forward cautiously. There's a few of us who feel some unfair treatment. Some comments were harsh. Lila met their gaze, calm, precise. Every observation I make is based on merit. Bias or expectation does not influence my judgment. If there is a question, we discuss it openly. The junior designer blinked, relief washing over her face. Thank you, she whispered. From across the room, a participant muttered to her friend, She's unshakable. She's calm under every pressure. Yes, whispered her friend. But watch, they are not done. They are trying. A micro-twist hit as the woman in white whispered to a male organizer. The audience saw her power. Back here, we can still influence perception. Let's see if she cracks. Lila caught the flicker in their eyes. She knew exactly what was being calculated, every subtle attempt to intimidate her. They are testing me, trying to break composure. She let her smile remain calm, a shield as much as a statement. Another participant, frustrated, slammed a notebook onto a table. It's not fair. She doesn't understand the vision. Lila looked at her, voice soft but firm. Explain your vision clearly. I'm listening. But anger doesn't replace articulation. The participant froze, caught between frustration and clarity. Murmurs rose from the others. She's not just listening, she's understanding. From behind, a staff member whispered. Some designers are circulating questions about her authority. Social media is buzzing already. Some are doubting her legitimacy. Lila's pulse stayed steady. Doubt is temporary, she said under her breath. Merit is permanent. The woman in white smirk faltered. Her lips pressed thin. She stepped closer, voice low but threatening. You may be surviving this hour, but the real pressure comes when awards are announced. People will remember every critique, every judgment. One mistake. Lila tilted her head, calm, deliberate. No mistake will come from fairness, clarity, and merit. A murmur went through the designers. Some nodded, reluctantly impressed. Others leaned back, tense, unwilling to concede. Cameras from the media team caught fragments of conversation, flashes highlighting nervous glances and whispered commentary. Then came the next micro-twist. One participant, previously quiet, muttered aloud, "She's exposing more than just our designs. She's exposing the biases, the favoritism, the politics." The room froze. Even the woman in white stiffened. Lila's gaze swept the backstage area. Calm, precise, unyielding. The exposure was extending beyond the hall, beyond the audience, into the very backstage dynamics. A photographer angled his camera, whispering to a colleague, "The moment she critiques them, it's going to be viral. Everyone's watching." "Yes," replied the other. "And some are going to hate her for it." A designer leaned forward nervously. Some participants want to confront her. They feel undermined." Lila's eyes narrowed slightly, still calm. "Let them confront. I will respond with clarity, not aggression. Merit, evidence, fairness, nothing more is needed." Another micro-twist unfolded. The woman in white whispered again to an ally, "Watch. She's unflinching. But someone's going to challenge her authority publicly soon. It's inevitable." The room grew tense. Cameras, whispers, nervous laughter, all layered into an invisible current of anxiety. Yet Lila remained the eye of the storm, calm, steady, authoritative. Then the final twist for the chapter. From the doorway, a participant stepped forward, voice loud enough for the entire backstage area. "You're judging us. After all the whispers, the doubts, how can we trust your decisions? Who says you're right?" Silence. Every whisper froze mid-word. Even the woman in white stepped back, eyes narrowing, lips pressed tight. Cameras pivoted, capturing the tension, the challenge, the confrontation. Lila inhaled slowly. Every muscle relaxed. Eyes steady, calm, unshakable. "I am right," she said, voice low, deliberate, and measured. "Because I judge only on merit, fairness, and clarity. That is my authority. And it is undeniable." A murmur ran through the room, some incredulous, some relieved, some forced admiration. The tension was still thick, but now it was balanced by undeniable respect. The stage was set for the next battle, the final rounds, the ultimate exposure, the moment of truth. Cliffhanger. The woman in white stepped closer, voice sharp, eyes blazing. "Don't think this ends here. Everyone will remember your every move. And if you misstep..." Lila smiled faintly, calm, eyes sweeping the room. "Then they'll learn the cost of underestimating authority." Backstage, the storm had arrived, and no one would walk away unchanged. The main hall was quieter than usual. The murmurs had shifted from doubt to anticipation. Cameras flashed intermittently, capturing every glance, every movement, every subtle exchange of expressions. Lila stood at the judging table, her notes perfectly aligned, her presence calm yet commanding. A young participant approached, voice hesitant but earnest. I wanted to say, thank you, for taking our work seriously." Lila nodded, eyes meeting theirs with quiet affirmation. "Every submission deserves fairness. Merit isn't negotiable." From the back of the room, the woman in white muttered under her breath, scowling. "She's making everyone rethink their assumptions." "It's dangerous." "Dangerous," whispered a colleague to her side. "No, she's exposing the truth." The tension in the room had shifted. Microaggressions were still present, coded language still whispered, but their power was faltering. Lila had subtly dismantled the hierarchy of expectation, revealing the bias under the polite veneer of the event. "Your collection," she said to the young designer in gold, "shows both innovation and respect for tradition. But remember, the audience sees not just your work, but how you present it. Balance is key." The designer exhaled slowly, visibly relieved. "Thank you," she said softly. Then came the micro-twist. A participant whispered, loud enough for the nearby cameras, "She's fair. She sees through everything." The woman in white's lips pressed thin, jaw tight. She approached Lila, voice sharp. "You've impressed some, yes, but do you realize the backlash you could face? Sponsors, participants, the media, they'll question you. Public perception matters." "I understand," Lila said evenly. "But perception is shaped by actions, not bias. I judge fairly. Merit is undeniable when it is applied consistently." Murmurs ran through the room. Cameras focused, flashes illuminating the subtle shift of power. Participants whispered to one another, "She's not just surviving, she's changing the rules." A staff member approached nervously. Some participants are circulating critiques online. Social media is buzzing. Some are praising you, others challenging you. Lila inhaled slowly. Let them. Exposure is the only way bias can be corrected. Fairness will speak louder than rumor. Then came the next micro-twist. One of the participants, previously skeptical, spoke aloud, voice carrying across the room. I didn't expect her to be right. All along, I thought she'd stumble, but she hasn't. The room shifted visibly. Whispers, side glances, subtle nods. Even the woman in white's expression faltered, a thin veil of respect piercing her usual disdain. Lila's gaze swept across the participants. Calm, measured, authoritative. Every hesitation, every doubt, every subtle smirk or whispered jab now confronted her undeniable competence. "You've made it clear," the woman in white said, voice lower now, cautious. "You can handle pressure, exposure, authority. But do you understand what comes next?" "Yes," Lila replied. "I understand accountability. I understand responsibility. And I understand that bias, when exposed, cannot persist unnoticed." Then came the final micro-twist. A young journalist stepped forward, voice loud enough for cameras and attendees to hear. "Everyone's talking about you. They want to know, how did you stay composed? How did you handle bias and authority challenges?" Lila's eyes swept the room slowly, taking in the cameras, the participants, the whispers, the subtle admiration hidden among disbelief. Calm, precise, fairness isn't about popularity. It's about merit, observation, and courage. That is how bias is defeated. That is how authority earns respect. A murmur ran through the crowd. Some participants nodded slowly. Others exchanged tense glances. Even the woman in white swallowed, lips pressing tight, eyes narrowing, but now not in aggression, but in recognition. The penultimate moment arrived. Lila called the next designer forward for evaluation. Every critique, every observation, every subtle note was now under scrutiny from the audience as much as from the participants. The tension had escalated to near-unbearable levels. "You are aware," Lila said to the designer, "that every choice you make will be examined. But fear of scrutiny should never replace clarity, creativity, or courage." The designer nodded, visibly bolstered. Cameras clicked. Whispers turned to soft exclamations of admiration. Microaggressions were present still, but they had been neutralized by competence, authority, and calm resilience. Then the final cliffhanger hit. The woman in white, lips pressed tight, leaned forward and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "You may have handled tonight, but the real test is whether your authority can survive exposure beyond these walls. The sponsors, the media, everyone, they will scrutinize your decisions." The room froze. Every whisper, every movement, every flash of camera light held a collective breath. Lila's calm smile did not falter. She inhaled slowly, eyes sweeping across every participant, judge, and staff member present. "I understand," she said firmly. "And that is why I act with merit, fairness, and transparency. Exposure doesn't weaken authority, it confirms it. The truth always prevails." A hush fell. The storm backstage, in the hall, and in every whispered conversation across the event had finally collided. Lila had not only survived scrutiny, bias, and intimidation, she had turned it into undeniable authority. Cliffhanger. From the back of the hall, a participant whispered to a friend, voice trembling slightly. She just proved them all wrong. But the final decisions, who will survive them?" The room held its collective breath. Lila's calm gaze, steady hands, and precise authority promised a conclusion that would not just judge talent, but reveal the cost of bias and the price of integrity. The main hall was tense, charged with anticipation. The audience leaned forward in their seats, cameras poised, whispers subdued but electric. Lila's presence at the judging table radiated calm authority. Every eye followed her movements, every subtle glance measured her. "Next up," the event coordinator announced, voice shaking slightly under the weight of expectation. "The awards for excellence in design." Lila's pen hovered over her notes. She inhaled slowly, letting the tension settle into focus. Every decision, every critique, every observation of bias backstage and on stage had led to this moment. From the corner of the hall, the woman in white whispered to a colleague, voice sharp with frustration, She's done it again. Everyone is watching her. Everyone. Yes, the colleague replied quietly. And no one can deny her authority. The first award was called. Lila's eyes scanned the room, noting reactions, whispers of admiration, small sighs of surprise, subtle nods of respect. Participants approached nervously, holding their work, their dreams, their stakes. You've done excellent work, Lila said to the winner, a young designer in blue, eyes bright with hope. Your innovation, your balance, your use of form, each is precise. You have earned this recognition. A soft murmur ran through the crowd. Cameras flashed. Even the woman in white's lips pressed tight, eyes narrowing but now laced with grudging respect. The next award was announced. Another designer approached, tense, skeptical of Lila's decisions. Are you sure? She asked, voice tight. You haven't shown favoritism. Lila met her gaze steadily. I judge only on merit. Your recognition is earned. Nothing else influences these awards. A hush fell across the hall. Murmurs of disbelief mingled with admiration. Whispers of bias evaporated in the presence of undeniable fairness. The power dynamics had shifted. Lila's authority was no longer questioned. It was confirmed. Then came the first micro-twist. From the back, a participant whispered loudly enough for nearby cameras to catch. She's fair. She's exposing all the favoritism and bias here. The room stiffened. Even the woman in white's smirk faltered, lips pressing thin. Her whispered threats and subtle intimidation now confronted the stark reality of merit, clarity, and transparency. The final award approached, the highest honor of the night. Participants, judges, and audience alike held their collective breath. Every glance, every whispered speculation, every camera flash heightened the tension. Lila stood, calm and poised. Her gaze swept across the participants, assessing not just the work but the courage, the resilience, the integrity displayed in every submission. This award, Lila said, voice firm and resonant, goes to the designer who not only demonstrates innovation and craft, but also courage, creativity, and integrity under pressure. Someone who has met every challenge without compromise, and who has risen despite expectation, doubt, and bias. A murmur ran through the audience. Eyes widened. The woman in white's jaw tightened, lips pressed in frustration. Lila held the envelope, her calm gaze unwavering. She slowly opened it, then looked at the recipient, an underdog, a participant previously doubted, whispered about, underestimated. You, Lila said clearly, her voice echoing through the hall. You have earned the highest recognition of the event. Your work, your vision, your courage, and your integrity are unparalleled. Gasps rippled through the audience. Cameras clicked rapidly. Whispers erupted. She gave it to them. But they weren't expected to win. The woman in white's expression faltered entirely. Her thin veneer of control had cracked. Lila's authority, calm and unwavering, had exposed the bias that had been quietly dominating the room. The recipient stepped forward, eyes wide, trembling with disbelief. I don't know what to say, they whispered. You've earned it, Lila replied softly but firmly. Let your work, your courage, and your integrity speak for itself. Another micro-twist hit. From the back, a participant muttered. She didn't just judge fairly, she exposed all the favoritism and hierarchy in this room. Yes, someone whispered in awe. And she did it calmly, without drama. Unflinching. The audience erupted into applause. Cameras flashed. Even the organizers exchanged subtle nods, acknowledging the shift. Authority had been tested, bias had been confronted, and fairness had prevailed. The woman in white, lips pressed tight, finally stepped forward, voice low but respectful. You've handled everything with poise, authority, and fairness. I didn't expect this. Lila's gaze met hers. Calm, unwavering, precise. Expectations don't define merit. Actions do. And bias cannot withstand transparency. A murmur ran through the crowd. The psychological tension had dissolved into respect. The event had been transformed, not just by the awards, but by the undeniable display of authority, integrity, and courage. Then came the final micro-twist. A journalist whispered into a microphone, recording live. This head judge has not only awarded excellence, she's exposed systemic bias, favoritism, and expectation. The consequences for this event will be far-reaching. The room froze. Even the woman in white's expression softened slightly, acknowledgement replacing resistance. Lila's calm smile remained, steady as ever. Cliffhanger or emotional resolution, Lila looked around at the participants, the audience, the cameras, and the whispers that now carried respect rather than doubt. Every subtle act of bias, every whispered expectation, every challenge had been met and neutralized. She had delivered fairness, exposure, and undeniable authority. And yet, she knew the cost. Behind the calm exterior, adrenaline still surged, nerves still hummed. Bias and injustice leave scars, not on paper, but on those who witness and confront them. Tonight, she had won, but she carried the weight of every whispered doubt, every subtle jab, every systemic pressure faced by those around her. A soft murmur rose from the audience. She did it. She proved them all wrong. Lila exhaled slowly. Her victory was real, but it was bittersweet. She had confronted bias, exposed authority abuse, and upheld fairness, but the emotional cost, the quiet trauma of every subtle insult, every whispered doubt, remained. The room erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. Respect had been earned, authority confirmed, and justice served, not in revenge, but in clarity, courage, and fairness.